Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm SpiderFish. Let's get right into the stories for tonight. Story 1. Am I the a-hole for hiding my wife's alarm clock collection? I know, right off the bat that sounds ridiculous. Who even has a collection of alarm clocks? But trust me, if you've ever lived with someone who treats 5 a.m. like it's an Olympic sport, you'll understand my pain. My wife, Anna, is what you'd call an extremely motivated morning person. And when I say morning person, I mean that if the sun's not up, she takes it as a personal challenge. She's always been that way. Up before dawn, doing yoga, journaling, making breakfast that smells like a lifestyle commercial. Meanwhile, I'm the kind of person who considers waking up before 8 a national emergency. When we first moved in together, it wasn't too bad. She'd quietly get up, go for a jog, make her smoothie, and I'd roll out of bed when the coffee smell got strong enough. But somewhere along the way, she decided she needed multiple alarms to optimize her wake-up routine. I didn't realize multiple meant 7. 7 alarm clocks, each one set at different times. Each one with its own unique sound. One chirped, one buzzed, one sounded like an air raid siren. And because she said she sleeps deeper than she used to, she spread them around the apartment. One on her nightstand, one on the dresser, one in the hallway, one, I swear I'm not making this up, in the kitchen. The first morning after this new system began, I thought the world was ending. It started at 4:30. A soft chime, easy enough to ignore. Then 4:35, the chirping bird clock. Then the foghorn at 4:45. By 5 o'clock, I was wide awake, sitting in bed like I'd just seen combat. She, on the other hand, smiled sleepily and said, "Perfect timing." I wanted to see the sunrise. I wanted to see my peace and quiet return from the dead. At first, I tried to be supportive. I told myself, she's just disciplined. This is good for her. But by week 3, I was developing a nervous twitch every time I heard ticking. I brought it up gently, emphasis on gently. I said, "Hey babe, maybe we could, consolidate the alarms a little." She looked horrified. "You mean fewer alarms?" Like I'd just suggested we cancel Christmas. She said, "You don't understand. It's all about mindset. Each clock represents a stage of awakening." A stage of awakening? What was she? A Buddhist monk with Amazon Prime. So one night, after a particularly painful morning that started at 4:20 because one clock was misaligned, I snapped. Not outwardly, not dramatically. I didn't yell or make a scene. I simply took action. While she was at work, I gathered the alarm clocks, all 7, and relocated them to the guest bedroom closet. I left one, her main phone alarm, by the bed, just so I couldn't be accused of cruelty. That night, she didn't notice. The next morning, she woke up peacefully, stretched, and said, "Wow, I slept great." I smiled, said, "Yeah, maybe the sunrise energy is just right today." She went on her jog, and I thought maybe I'd gotten away with it. But I underestimated the instinct of a true morning person. That night, she started walking around the apartment, frowning. "Where's the kitchen clock?" I said, "Maybe it's in the dishwasher?" She gave me a look that could peel paint. Then she started searching like a detective. When she opened the guest closet and saw all 7 clocks stacked neatly in a box, her expression could have powered a small generator. "Why?" she asked. Just that one word. I said, "Because I love you, but I also love sleep." And those two things were starting to feel mutually exclusive. She just stood there, blinking. Then she said, "You hid my clocks?" I said, "Technically, I relocated them to a neutral zone." She didn't talk to me for a whole day. That night, I went to bed alone, half expecting her to plant a new alarm under my pillow out of spite. But the next morning, something weird happened. Nothing. No alarms, no foghorn, just silence. When I walked into the kitchen, she was sipping coffee, reading a book. She looked up and said, "I actually slept better without them." I said, "So, truce?" She smiled. "For now." It's been 6 months since Operation Sleep Restoration. We still joke about it. She calls it the Great Clock Purge. And every time she mentions buying a new one, I just look at her and say, "Stage of awakening, huh?" She rolls her eyes, but we both laugh. Sometimes love isn't about grand gestures. It's about small, ridiculous ones, like hiding alarm clocks for the sake of your sanity. But not every relationship story ends in laughter. Some are lessons that sting a little before they heal. Let's move on to our next story. One about mistakes, forgiveness, and learning when not to fix something. Story 2. My ex moved out, but he forgot to take his Wi-Fi with him. When my ex Jordan finally moved out, I thought that was it. The end. The credits roll, fade to black. What I didn't realize was that our breakup would last longer than the actual relationship, all because of one stupid Wi-Fi password. Let me back up a little. Jordan and I met in the kind of way people always say, "You'll laugh about someday." Spoiler, I didn't laugh. We met at a mutual friend's game night, both arguing over whether pineapple belongs on pizza. He was loud, charismatic, the kind of person who filled a room without trying. And I was quiet, the opposite of him. But for some reason, he decided I was mysterious. A few dates later, he declared that we were soulmates who just hadn't synced up yet. At the time, I thought it was romantic. Now, I realize it sounded like something you'd say to a broken Bluetooth speaker. We moved fast, too fast. Within 3 months, he'd practically moved into my apartment. He had a toothbrush, a key, and his video game console set up before I'd even introduced him to my parents. It was good in the beginning. He was fun, spontaneous, full of energy. He'd make me breakfast in bed, surprise me with little gifts, talk about our future like it was already happening. But somewhere along the way, fun and spontaneous turned into reckless and unreliable. Jordan was one of those people who couldn't hold on to a job for longer than a few months, but somehow always had a new big idea that was going to make us rich. First, it was a YouTube channel, then a podcast, then a cryptocurrency project that never got past the Google Doc stage. He said I was too cautious. I said he was too impulsive. He said opposites attract. I said they also crash. The final straw came on a random Tuesday. I came home from work to find he'd thrown a party. Not a few friends over party, a full-blown, music-shaking, pizza boxes on the floor, I stepped on a PS5 controller kind of party. And when I asked him what was going on, he said, "Relax, babe. You said I should network more." That night, we had the kind of argument that changes things. You know that feeling when someone says something you can't unhear. He told me I didn't know how to have fun anymore. I told him to have fun finding a new apartment. The breakup wasn't cinematic. No tears, no dramatic exits. He packed his things while I sat on the couch pretending to scroll my phone, just counting the sounds of drawers closing. He took his clothes, his games, and his coffee machine. But when he left, he forgot one thing: the Wi-Fi. My internet account was still in his name. When we moved in together, he insisted on handling it because he had a better plan. So after he left, I was still using his network, Jordfi. The irony didn't hit me until about a week later, when my connection started acting weird. You ever have that moment when you're watching a show and suddenly the screen freezes and you just know someone's stealing your bandwidth? I checked the connected devices list, and there it was, Jordan's iPhone. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he just forgot to disconnect. Then another device popped up, Jordan's laptop. And that's when I realized my ex was still online in my life. Literally. So I did what any rational, recently single woman with limited tech skills would do. I changed the Wi-Fi password. I thought that'd be the end of it. But no. The next day, my phone buzzed. A text from Jordan. "Hey, did the Wi-Fi go down? My devices won't connect." I stared at my screen, trying to process the audacity. I replied, "Nope, I just changed the password since you moved out." He sent back a string of question marks. Then, "Oh, I thought I could still use it for a bit. I have some stuff uploading." Uploading? What was he? The United Nations? I said, "Jordan, you don't live here anymore. Get your own Wi-Fi." He replied, "Wow, okay, cold." Cold. Right, because that's the issue here. A week later, my internet cut out completely. I called the provider thinking it was a service issue. The rep checked my account and said, "Oh, looks like it was cancelled by the account holder." The account holder, meaning Jordan. I just sat there in silence, trying to absorb the fact that my ex had not only left me, but also digitally evicted me. I asked if they could reactivate the service under my name, and the rep said, "Sure, but you'll need new equipment." Meaning, new router, new modem, new everything. Fine. I drove to the store, picked it all up, spent the evening setting it up like a 1950s scientist with too many wires. When I finally got it working, I renamed the network Not Jordfi. Petty? Maybe, but satisfying. About 2 days later, I got another text. "Hey, I can't connect to the Wi-Fi anymore." I didn't reply. Then another, "Wait, did you name it Not Jordfi?" Real mature. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my phone. But here's the thing, it didn't stop there. Jordan started popping back up in small ways. He'd accidentally text me memes, or send a random, "Hope you're doing well." At first, I ignored it. But after the 5th message, I realized this wasn't about missing me. This was about missing control. It's funny how some people can't handle being erased from your life, so they try to stay in it through any tiny crack they can find. Then, a month later, something even weirder happened. I got an email, a notification from my streaming service. It said, "New device added, Jordan's TV." I blinked, twice. This man had somehow logged back into my account. So I checked my continue watching list, and there it was. Shows I'd never seen. Fast cars and firearms. Crypto kings. Men who hunt sharks for fun. Peak Jordan content. That's when I decided to go nuclear. I waited until a Sunday night. Prime binge-watching hours. Then, one by one, I started kicking devices off the account. Every time I removed one, I imagined him sitting there on the couch, frustrated, clicking the remote harder like that would help. After the 4th disconnect, I renamed the account, "Enjoy Your Buffering." Then I logged out of everything, changed all the passwords, and enabled 2-factor authentication on every service I had. For good measure, I made the security question something no one could guess. What's the one thing Jordan never paid for? Answer, rent. A few days later, my friend sent me a screenshot. Jordan had posted something cryptic on his story. A black background with white text. "Some people are so petty. You try to stay friends and they act like you're toxic. Grow up." Oh, I grew up. I just grew past him. I didn't respond, didn't react, just kept living my peaceful, Wi-Fi secure life. But the story doesn't end there. Because Karma, bless her soul, decided to make an appearance. 3 weeks later, I got an email from the same internet company. It said, "We've noticed a delinquent account associated with your address. Would you like to transfer service from the previous customer?" Meaning, Jordan hadn't paid his final bill. And because he'd cancelled it prematurely, he still owed money. A lot of it. So I called the provider, explained the situation, and they told me I could technically reclaim the old account if I wanted to. Which meant one glorious thing. I could rename it back to Jordfi. I did. And then, just to twist the knife a little deeper, I added a secondary guest network. I named that one Move Out Already. That same night, I got a text. "So, you got your own Wi-Fi now?" I didn't respond. A few minutes later, "You named it Jordfi again. You're obsessed." "No, Jordan, I'm healed. I just have a sense of humor." Fast forward a few months, I started dating someone new, a guy named Ethan. He's calm, kind, has an actual job, and doesn't believe networking means throwing beer pong tournaments. When he came over for the first time, he asked for the Wi-Fi password. I told him it was moving on 2023. He laughed, typed it in and said, "That's the best password I've ever seen." Here's the part I didn't expect. A few weeks after that, I ran into Jordan at the grocery store. It was one of those weird moments where you both see each other and pretend not to, but the aisle's too narrow to escape. He smiled, said, "Hey." I smiled back, said, "Hey." There was this pause, not angry, just awkward. He asked, "How's the Wi-Fi?" I said, "Strong signal, no lag." He nodded like that meant something profound. Then he said, "Good. You deserve that." And I don't know why, but that line hit harder than I expected. Because for once, it didn't sound like sarcasm. It sounded like he meant it. He looked tired. Not bad, just older, in that way you get when life humbles you a bit. I didn't hate him anymore, not even a little. We just weren't part of each other's story anymore. And that's okay. That night, I sat on my couch, opened Netflix, and noticed something strange. Someone had added a new profile. It was called Jay. I stared at it, heart pounding, then laughed out loud. Turns out, Ethan had made it for himself. He said he didn't want to mess up my recommendations. And for a second, it felt poetic. Like the universe was saying, "See, you can add new people without deleting yourself." Sometimes, letting go doesn't mean blocking someone or deleting every trace of them. Sometimes, it just means changing the password to your Wi-Fi, your heart, or your peace. But not every story ends with laughter. Some remind us that even the things we laugh about now used to hurt a lot once. Let's move on to our next story, one that starts as a mistake and ends with a lesson that sticks. Story 3. TIFU by forgetting my dad's birthday. So, I messed up. Not in the oops, I sent the wrong text kind of way, but in the slow, aching, gut-deep kind of way that you can't fix with an apology or a meme. I forgot my dad's birthday. That might not sound like a tragedy on the surface, right? People forget birthdays all the time, but this wasn't just any year. This was the first one since my mom passed away. And my dad, he's the kind of man who never asks for much. He's quiet, humble, a little awkward when it comes to emotions. The kind of dad who says, "Love you," only on birthdays or when he's had a couple beers watching football. He's been through a lot. Losing mom broke something in him. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a quiet, slow-motion crumble. The kind you don't notice until you realize the laughter in the house sounds different. So yeah, I forgot his birthday. And I didn't just forget, I completely forgot. The day started like any other. I woke up late, scrolled through my phone, got dressed for work, stopped by the same coffee shop I always do. The barista complimented my earrings, I smiled, said thanks, and went on with my day. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from my brother. "Hey, are you going to Dad's tonight?" My heart sank. That familiar electric jolt of panic shot through me. I stared at the message like maybe, somehow, the words would rearrange themselves into something less condemning. I typed back, "Tonight?" He replied instantly, yeah, it's his birthday." And just like that, my stomach dropped out from under me. I checked the date. Sure enough, the 14th. How could I have missed it? I'd set a reminder. I always do. But this time, my phone had auto-cleared the old alert and didn't renew it when I switched apps. And because I've been running on autopilot lately, work, bills, trying to keep my life from collapsing into laundry piles, I just didn't notice. I looked at the clock. It was 12:08. I could still fix this. Maybe. I bolted out of my office like I was escaping a crime scene. I told my boss I had an urgent family matter, which wasn't technically a lie. I ran to my car, called the bakery near Dad's house, and begged them to make a chocolate cake by 5 o'clock. Then I stopped at the store for candles, wrapping paper, and the most generic birthday card you can imagine. The kind with confetti and the words, "You're the best," in fonts so loud they practically scream. I told myself it wasn't about perfection, it was about effort. But even as I rushed around, I could feel the guilt sitting heavy in my chest, whispering that it was already too late. By the time I got to Dad's, it was just after 6. The sun was setting, that kind of warm orange glow that makes everything look a little nostalgic. His truck was in the driveway. The porch light was on. I knocked. He opened the door with that same expression he always had. Gentle confusion mixed with mild amusement. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "What brings you here?" I held up the cake box like a peace offering. "Birthday emergency delivery?" His eyebrows lifted slightly. "You remembered." And that's when it hit me. He didn't expect me to. He wasn't mad. He wasn't disappointed. He'd just assumed I'd forgotten. And somehow, that was worse. I stepped inside. The house smelled the same, faintly like motor oil and laundry detergent. The TV was on, muted, flickering through an old movie. On the counter sat a half-eaten microwave dinner. No balloons, no cards, no company. Just him, sitting alone on his own birthday. "Where's Nate?" I asked, meaning my brother. "Stopped by earlier," he said, shrugging. "Had to take the kids to practice." He smiled a little. "Didn't think I'd see you tonight? Figured you were busy." Something about that last line twisted in my gut. We sat at the table, eating cake off mismatched plates. He talked about little things. The car acting up, the neighbor's new fence, the weather. I nodded, laughed when it felt right. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time I looked at him, I saw how much older he looked. The lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders more hunched. He used to seem indestructible, the kind of dad who could fix anything with duct tape and determination. Now he just seemed tired. At one point, he said, "You know, your mom used to make this cake every year." I froze mid-bite. He smiled faintly. "She'd used too much cocoa powder. Said it made it richer. I used to tease her about it." He laughed quietly, that kind of half laugh that's more breath than sound. Then he added, "Guess I forgot how good it tastes." And I don't know why, but that broke me a little, because I realized he wasn't just missing her. He was missing the rituals that came with her, the little traditions that made life feel steady. And I'd forgotten the one day that reminded him he still mattered. After dinner, we sat on the porch for a while. The sky was fading from orange to blue. Crickets hummed in the distance. He said, "You remember when you were a kid and you used to draw me birthday cards? You'd tape them to the fridge?" I nodded, smiling. "Yeah, you kept them all." "Still got 'em," he said, "in the drawer by the TV." Then, quieter. "You don't have to do that anymore, you know. The cards, the surprises. I know you've got your own life." I wanted to tell him that wasn't true, that he was still part of my life, still my anchor. But the words got stuck somewhere behind the guilt and the lump in my throat. So I just said, "You'll get another card next year. A real one." He smiled, like he didn't quite believe me. When I left that night, I sat in my car for a while, staring at the dark outline of the house. I could see him through the window, turning off the porch light, going through his quiet little routine. And I thought about how easy it is to drift away from people. Not because we stop caring, but because life keeps nudging us forward, telling us we'll have time later. But later has a way of disappearing. The next morning, I called him again. He answered with his usual, "Hey, kiddo." "I was thinking," I said. "You still got that old fishing rod?" He laughed. "Course I do." "Why?" "Let's go this weekend," I said. "Just us. Like we used to." There was a pause on the line. Not awkward, just long enough to mean something. Then he said, "Yeah, I'd like that." We went that Saturday. The weather was perfect. A soft breeze, sunlight skipping across the water. He packed sandwiches in a cooler, just like he used to when I was little. We didn't talk about Mom much, or the birthday, or the cake. We just fished. And for a few hours, It felt like time slowed down enough for both of us to breathe again. At one point, he looked out over the lake and said, "You know, your mom always said fishing was a waste of time." I smiled. "Guess we're wasting it well." He chuckled, reeled in a line, and said, "Guess we are." When we packed up to leave, he clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Thanks for coming," he said. "Thanks for inviting me," I replied. He shook his head. "Didn't have to. You just showed up." And somehow, that line, "you just showed up," stuck with me more than anything else. Because here's the thing. We spend so much of our lives thinking love is about doing things. Buying the gifts, saying the right words, remembering the dates. And yeah, those things matter. But sometimes love is just showing up, sitting in silence next to someone who needs to know they're not invisible. That night, after I dropped him off, I found the old photo album Mom used to keep. Inside was a picture of me at 6 years old, standing next to Dad on the porch, holding a birthday card covered in stickers. He had the same smile then that he did that night on the dock. Soft, proud, grateful. And I realized maybe I hadn't failed him after all. Maybe forgetting that one day didn't erase the years I'd remembered. Maybe the point wasn't to be perfect. It was to keep trying. A few days later, I got a text from him. It just said, "Thanks again for the cake. Mom would have loved it." And that's when I knew we were okay. Months have passed since then, but that day still sits with me. A little lesson wrapped in guilt and forgiveness. I still forget things sometimes. Appointments, deadlines, birthdays. I'm human. But now, whenever I set a reminder, I write a note next to it. Show up. Because that's the part that matters. Even if you're late. Even if you mess it up. Even if you bring the wrong cake and forget the candles. Just show up. Sometimes we mess up in ways that hurt more than we expect. But if we're lucky, the people who love us most don't need perfection. They just need presence. Our final story tonight takes a different turn. A story about what happens when the things we think we understand, love, safety, even reality, start to feel a little off. So, take another breath. Get comfortable. Because this last one gets strange. Story 4. The House That Listened. I moved into the old house on Hollow Creek Road because it was cheap and because cheap was all I could afford. The landlord called it vintage, but it wasn't vintage. It was just tired. Peeling paint, creaky floors, a roof that sighed every time the wind changed its mind. The first night I slept there, I remember thinking the place felt alive, not in a poetic sense, but in the way an old dog still breathes even when it's dreaming. It was always making noise. Soft cracks, distant knocks, the kind of murmurs that sound like a conversation through a wall. I told myself it was just wood and air. The house settling, the same phrase everyone uses when they don't want to admit they're a little scared of silence. But Hollow Creek never really gave me silence. Not once. It started small. On the third night, I woke up around 2:30 to a faint humming sound. Not machinery, not the fridge or pipes. This was low, rhythmic, almost like a tune. It came from the vent beside my bed. I pressed my ear against it and could swear I heard words, too faint to make out. The next morning, I checked. The vent wasn't connected to anything. The ducts had been sealed years ago, when the landlord replaced the heating system. I even asked the neighbors if they'd heard anything, but the nearest house was 200 yards away and empty. The realtor had mentioned the old owners had moved out suddenly, and the way she said suddenly made me picture someone packing boxes at midnight with shaking hands. By the end of the first week, I'd stopped trying to explain it. I just let the house do its thing. The noises were almost comforting in a weird way, like the place didn't want me to feel alone. When I came home from work, I'd say, "I'm back," half joking. And sometimes I'd hear a soft tap on the wall in response. It could have been pipes. It probably was pipes. But still, I'd find myself smiling. Then one evening, I got home late, around 11. I was walking through the hallway when my phone buzzed with a notification from the smart speaker I'd brought from my old apartment. It said, "Voice detected. Welcome home." I froze. The speaker wasn't plugged in. I hadn't even unpacked it yet. I laughed it off. A glitch, some cached audio, whatever. I didn't want to start imagining things because imagination in that house had a way of turning into reality. A few nights later, the humming came back, louder this time and clearer. I could hear syllables now, short phrases slipping through the air vents like steam. "Stay inside," it said once. "Don't answer." I sat up, every hair on my arms standing, heart beating so fast it hurt. I grabbed my phone to record it, but the moment I hit record, it stopped. Dead quiet. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. I couldn't sleep after that. Around 4 a.m., I gave up and made tea. The kitchen window looked out onto the backyard, a dark patch of overgrown grass and one lopsided oak tree. While I was stirring sugar into my mug, I saw something move behind the tree. Just a shape, a flicker. I thought maybe it was the wind until I saw the reflection in the glass. Someone standing behind me in the kitchen doorway. I spun around so fast the mug shattered in my hand. But no one was there. The doorway was empty. The air, though, was warm, like someone had just exhaled. The next morning, I noticed something carved into the kitchen table. I swear it hadn't been there the night before. 3 words, shallow but deliberate. "Did you hear?" The letters were uneven, like a child had written them with a dull knife. I touched them and felt splinters bite my fingertips. That night, I slept with the lights on, which didn't help because light only made the shadows sharper. Around midnight, I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, dragging ones. The kind that come from bare feet, not shoes. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. I climbed halfway up the stairs before I lost my nerve. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain and rust. I didn't go any farther. Over the next few days, the house got friendlier. It started reacting to me. When I said something out loud, I'd get a noise back, a creak, a knock, a door shifting slightly on its hinges. One morning I said, "I'm late again," and the clock on the mantel stopped ticking. It stayed frozen at 7:12 until I got home from work, then started again the moment I walked in. I remember whispering, "Okay, that's weird," and the living room lights flickered twice, like laughter. I began talking to it more, because what else do you do when you're living alone in a place that listens? I'd say goodnight, and the hum from the vents would rise slightly, almost like a purr. But the thing about being listened to is that eventually you start to wonder what's doing the listening. One afternoon, I found an envelope slid under the front door. No name, no return address, just my street number scrawled across it. Inside was a photograph, black and white, grainy, probably decades old. It showed the same kitchen I was standing in, same crooked cabinets, same window. Except in the photo, there were 4 people sitting around the table, a woman, a man, and 2 kids, all smiling, all looking directly at the camera. And behind them, in the corner of the frame, barely visible in the shadows, a 5th figure. Blurry but tall, thin, its head tilted, no face. Just that blur where a face should be. I looked at the back of the photo. Someone had written a date, June 14th, 1974, and below it, "We're still here." I tried to call the landlord, but her number went straight to voicemail. I drove to her office downtown, but it was closed. Empty, windows covered in paper. A neighbor finally told me the woman I'd rented from had died 6 months ago. Her son handled the listings now, but he was hard to reach. That night, I didn't even pretend to sleep. I sat in bed with the lights on, scrolling through old property records on my phone. Hollow Creek Road had been built in the 1950s. There'd been fires, floods, a handful of deaths. Nothing unusual for old houses. But one article stood out. Family of 4 found dead. Suspect never located. The address matched mine. The photo in the article matched the one I was holding. My rational brain told me it was coincidence. My nervous system disagreed. Around 3 a.m., the power went out. Total darkness, except for the faint green glow of my phone. I heard movement downstairs. That dragging step again. Then, whispering. Not from one place, but all around, seeping through the walls like smoke. I couldn't make out words, only tone, pleading, desperate. I grabbed my flashlight, went to the top of the stairs and called out, "What do you want?" The house answered. Every door slammed at once, a thunderclap of wood and metal. The air felt charged, buzzing against my skin. I stumbled back, dropped the flashlight. It rolled down the stairs, beam spinning wildly. For a split second, it caught something at the bottom. A shape, tall and thin, standing perfectly still. I blinked and it was gone. The hum in the walls rose into a low moan. I ran to my bedroom and locked the door, even though locks mean nothing when the thing you're afraid of lives inside the walls. When morning came, everything was quiet again. Too quiet. The lights worked, the power was back, no signs of damage. But the table, the one with "Did you hear?" carved into it, now had more words. Fainter this time, almost hesitant. "Thank you." I sat down, staring at it, trying to breathe normally. Thank you? For what? For listening? For surviving the night? For not leaving? I said out loud, "You're welcome," just to see what would happen. The house groaned softly, almost content. From then on, things calmed down. The noises didn't stop, but they changed. Less frantic, more like background conversation. I'd catch whispers sometimes, but they weren't threatening anymore. Just chatter, echoes of life that once filled these rooms. I even started to sleep better, like the house had accepted me. Then one day, while I was cleaning out the attic, I found another box. Inside were old letters tied with ribbon, brittle with age. Most were unreadable, but one stood out. The handwriting was careful, almost elegant. "If someone finds this, please be kind. The house listens. It remembers kindness. It was signed simply E." I never learned who E was. Maybe one of the kids from the photo, maybe someone after them. But I think about that letter a lot, especially on nights when the wind moves just right, and I hear that faint humming again. It doesn't scare me anymore. It just feels like company. People always ask why I still live there, why I haven't sold it or burned it down or fled in the middle of the night. I tell them the truth, because it's the first place that ever really listened to me. Because after all the noise of the world, traffic, phones, voices that talk over you, there's something peaceful about a house that only hums when you need it to. Sometimes I still talk to it. I'll say, "Good night," and feel the floorboards settle in reply. Or I'll whisper, "I'm home," and the air seems to warm around me, just a little. I don't ask questions anymore. I don't want to know what happened here or who's still listening. Some things don't need answers. Last week, a storm rolled through. Heavy rain, wind that bent the trees. The power flickered, and I sat by candlelight, listening to the house breathe. In the flicker of the flame, I saw movement in the window glass. 4 faint reflections behind me, all standing close together. A man, a woman, 2 kids, smiling, watching. I didn't turn around. I just said softly, "Good night, everyone." The hum rose once, low and gentle, and then faded as the candle went out. And now, every night, I sleep easily. Because I know I'm not alone. Not really. Because somewhere in the quiet, just before sleep, the house still listens. And maybe that's all any of us want. Someone or something that still listens when the world stops talking. Story 5. The Voice on the Answering Machine. When I first moved back to my hometown, the only thing I could afford was a tiny basement apartment in an old brick building that used to be a post office. It smelled faintly of paper and mildew and something older. something that clung to the walls no matter how many candles I lit. The landlord told me the unit came fully furnished, which turned out to mean one wobbly table, a couch that leaned to the left, and a dusty beige landline sitting on the counter. The phone wasn't even plugged in, but every few days the little red light on its answering machine would blink like it had something to say. I figured it was a wiring glitch, like everything else in that place, until the night I pressed play. The voice was male, low, muffled, the kind of tone you get when someone talks too close to the microphone. He said my name, not my full name, just the nickname my mother used to use, the one no one else had called me since she died. Then a pause and one sentence. Don't go out tomorrow. That was it. The message was dated 3 days earlier. I laughed at first because what else do you do? It had to be a prank. There was no caller ID, just a row of zeros. I unplugged the phone, tossed it in a drawer, and told myself to forget it. The next day was grey and ordinary. I went to work, came home, microwaved leftovers, tried to read. Around midnight, sirens screamed down my street. Later, I learned a drunk driver had ploughed into a coffee shop 3 blocks away at the exact time I usually stopped there after work. I didn't sleep much that night. The following morning, the red light was blinking again. I told myself I wouldn't press play. Curiosity doesn't listen. The same voice, softer this time. There's going to be a fire. Don't panic. The timestamp said 2:17 a.m., even though the phone was still unplugged. By then, I'd decided someone was messing with me. Maybe a neighbor, maybe the landlord. I checked every wire, every outlet, even the breaker box. Nothing connected to that line. Still, I left the building that afternoon and saw smoke curling above the roofs 2 blocks away. An electrical short in one of the old offices upstairs. No one hurt, but the coincidence scraped at me like a rough edge. Over the next few weeks, the messages kept coming. Never long, never more than a few sentences. Sometimes warnings. Stay home tonight. Don't answer the door. Sometimes small things. Eat something. Call your dad. Always spoken in that same calm, weary tone, like someone reading instructions they didn't entirely believe in. I stopped telling people. When I tried to explain it to a co-worker, she smiled politely and said I should get more sleep. When I told my father, he laughed and said old wiring can do weird things. But the next day, he called me first thing in the morning to say he'd dreamed about Mom. He said she'd told him to stay home from work. He listened, which saved him from a pile-up on the highway caused by black ice. After that, I started listening too. The voice never identified itself, but it always felt familiar, like hearing your own recording played back with a little static. Sometimes it sounded almost like me. I began keeping a notebook, writing each message down with its date and what happened afterward. Most of them were trivial. A warning about rain that came, a reminder to take my umbrella. Others were stranger. One said, "You left the window open." I checked, and it was closed. The next morning, there were wet footprints on the carpet beneath it. I started locking everything, double-checking doors, unplugging the machine entirely. The light still blinked. One night, half asleep on the couch, I heard the phone click. Not ring, click, like it was picking up on its own. Then the machine spoke, without me touching it. My own voice, unmistakably mine, whispered, "It's okay. You can rest now." The next morning, all the old recordings were gone. The memory chip was wiped clean, timestamps blank. The only thing left was that single sentence etched into the display screen as if burned there. It's okay. I moved out a week later. The landlord didn't ask for a reason. Maybe he already knew. Now I live across town. Newer building, no landlines. Still, every few nights around 2 a.m., my cell buzzes once. No caller ID, no message, just a soft static hum that fades when I answer. I keep it on speaker for a moment before hanging up. The hum is steady, almost comforting. People ask why I never changed my number. I tell them it's superstition, but the truth is simpler. Whoever that voice was Whatever it was, it never told me a lie. And somewhere deep down, a part of me still listens, just in case it ever needs to speak again. And that's where we'll leave it tonight. 5 stories. Some strange, some funny, some a little too real. But all about the same thing in the end. The way we reach out, even when we don't know who's listening. Sometimes it's love that keeps us awake. Sometimes it's guilt or fear or the ghost of a voice that still remembers our name. But every story starts with someone trying to be heard. If you're still here, still listening, I hope you found a little quiet in the noise. I hope you laughed at least once, maybe shivered once too. And I hope you remember that every mistake, every haunting, every heartbreak can still teach us something about who we are when no one's watching. So take a deep breath. Let the day go. You've done enough for one night. Thanks for staying with me. This is SpiderFish, signing off until next time. Sleep well and dream easy.